And lastly, this is where we're going to segue into emergency funds. So you always want to make sure that you have an emergency fund on hand. Originally, when we made this presentation, we said to aim for 3 to 6 months of living expenses, but I think after experiencing the pandemic, the, the recommendation is that you should probably plan for at least 12 months of living expenses, things you absolutely need to pay for, your mortgage payment, your rent, your utilities, any medical bills you might have. Things that are a necessity, you want to make sure you have enough money set aside to pay for these things to get you through whatever difficult time you're going through. So now we're going to segue into emergency funds, and we're going to start by looking at what is an emergency fund. So the academic definition is that it's an account that is used to set aside funds to be used in an emergency, such as the loss of a job, an illness, or a major expense. Our real world definition is that it's an easily accessible stash of money for use only in case of an emergency. So the first step is that you want to make sure that you can start one. Who should start one? Everyone. And why? Because you don't know what can happen. I don't think any of us at the end of 2019 saw a pandemic coming our way. And we surely, in our day-to-day lives, don't see any emergencies coming our way. They're often unpredictable, but when they hit, you want to make sure that you have enough money set aside to get you through that difficult situation. An emergency fund really will act as a cushion, and it'll be one less thing that you have to worry about when you're going through that difficult time, whatever it may be. You want to keep it close. You want to keep it handy, and you also want to keep it separate from the rest of your accounts. So personally, I keep a fund in a separate savings account, because if I'm keeping everything in, if I just have two accounts, let's say a checking and a savings, well, that savings account is going to be used for everything else I'm planning for, my financial goals, any bills that I have to pay for that month. You don't want to get your emergency savings intertwined with everything else that you have to pay for and everything else that you're planning to accomplish, because if you take money out of that savings account for an emergency, you're also taking money away from those other financial goals that you're planning for and other bills that you have to pay for that month. So that's really why it's best to just keep things separate. You also want to make sure that it's handy, like I said before. It's easily accessible, whether it's in an online banking account or you can go to a local ATM or a local branch and take money out directly from there. You just want to make sure it's in arm's reach, because emergencies happen fast and they can often, be really startling and might put a lot of pressure on you. So you just want to make sure that your finances are in reach. You also want to get to know your unknowns. So there are two types of unknown situations. There are unknown unknowns and there are known unknowns. Unknown unknowns are expenses that are truly unpredictable. We don't know when they'll happen, why they'll happen, or how they'll happen. We just know that they will happen at some point, but we just don't know when, how, or why. These are situations such as falling ill, if you have a medical emergency, or even getting into a car accident. Nobody ever predicts getting into a car accident. It can be completely random. You could even be stopped at a red light and then, unfortunately get rear-ended or something like that. Known unknowns, on the other hand, are expenses that are somewhat predictable. You don't know exactly when they'll happen, but you just know that it'll only be a matter of time. So a really good example of this is where you live and different natural disasters. So if you're someone who you just moved to Kansas and you have a nice farmhouse out on the open plains, you can expect that every spring and early summer is tornado season. So you want to make sure that you have the right insurance and the right funds set aside in order to pay for any damage that's done to your home, and also to make sure you have enough money to rebuild in the case that a tornado is really devastating and it wipes out your entire home or your community. You want to make sure you have enough money to set aside to pay for all the other expenses on top of it too: food, water, relocating, whatever it may be. So the fourth step is you want to define what an emergency is. Emergencies come in a lot of different forms for every person. What I may be considering an emergency, someone else might not consider an immediate emergency. But whatever it is, it's any situation that threatens the amount of cash flow that's coming into your account. And that's when your emergency fund steps in. So some examples are being out of work for an extended period of time if the economy is really bad one month or for a certain part of the year and you're out of work, you want to make sure you have enough money set aside to get you through that difficult time and to keep paying for the things you absolutely need to pay for. Another example is needing to take care of a loved one. This is another good example of an unknown, that could be an unknown unknown, or what we also call an underestimated known unknown. You know, sometimes emergencies happen and you have to take care of someone that's close to you. And sometimes it may be predictable, or sometimes it might not be. Regardless of what it is, you want to make sure you have enough money set aside to not only help take care of that person, but to also make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And if you have a family, you can provide for them as well. And lastly, waiting for an insurance reimbursement. If someone passes away and you're going through the process of waiting for life insurance or whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you have enough time to get you through. Want to make sure you have enough funds set aside to get you through that difficult time, because sometimes with the court systems and the legal systems and everything else, it might take an additional or prolonged period of time for you to receive those funds. So you just want to make sure you're as prepared as possible. Next, you want to calculate your goal. So like the PowerPoint said, you want to plan for at least 6 months of living expenses. So for example, if your first monthly expense is $500, you want to make sure that your emergency fund size is at least $3,000. And the important thing to remember is that it doesn't have to be $3,000. When you set your emergency fund up, it doesn't have to be $3,000 from the start. Contribute a little bit each month and get yourself to that $3,000 mark. That could be a benchmark that you set up, and then from there, once you reach that benchmark, you can increase it a little bit more to help you reach another goal even faster. Do what works best for you while also making sure that you're paying attention to your needs that you have to pay for in the present, and also your savings and your other wants as well. And the sixth step is making sure that you stick with it. So like I said, 6 months, and now what we recommend is 12 months. That can be a little intimidating for someone. But like I was also saying before, you want to make sure that you're setting benchmarks for yourself. Don't be afraid to set a goal. If your final goal is $3,000, you can set a goal saying, okay, I'm going to my halfway mark, um, or whatever it may be. I want to have at least $1,500 of my $3,000 goal set by a certain date. Do your best to put that money in there and do your best to get your fund set up. So once you reach that goal, you can increase it a little bit more and more, and that'll put you more towards your $3,000 goal. Going off of that, a healthy emergency fund takes a long time to build. Like I was saying, it's not going to happen right away, but be sure to take the time to really give it the attention that it needs, because like I was saying before during the budgeting section, it is technically a savings account, and you want to make sure that your savings are getting just as much attention as your wants and your needs, because you don't know when different emergencies will arise. You don't know how they'll happen, or you don't know when they'll happen. So you just have to be patient and keep reaching for your goal. Once you reach that goal, you can reward yourself by increasing the amount a little bit more each month.